I'm Ron Gallagher at Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy, and you're listening to HYPERSPEED Radio. You don't have to live in pain, whether you're running, swimming, playing a team sport, or just everyday fitness. We bridge a gap between medicine and strength and conditioning to help you break through at MVPT. Wow. What's up, everybody? This is HYPERSPEED Radio coming at you from Las Vegas, Nevada. I am Ron Gallagher at Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy, host of HYPERSPEED Radio. And today we are talking about 20 plus years working in a business of getting people healthy, helping them perform. I had an epiphany one morning. I had nothing to do for the first time in months. I'm just laying in bed and I'm like, how do I market why this service is different than other practitioners? And I came up with the Iceberg of Performance. And what's interesting about this is like everybody has a pyramid, right? So this essentially was born in trying to make a pyramid, but then I made two pyramids, and then I was like, well, what if they inverted? And Derek was helping me, and he helped me with this graphic, and it's perfect. So essentially, this is the Iceberg of Performance. And what we're looking at here is a water line right down the middle. And below the water line is all of the things that help a person get healthy, like what I would do, say, as a physical therapist. And everything above the waterline is what we would do in order to maximize a person's performance in their given activity or sport. And at the end, we're going to talk about 3 examples of how we use this model to essentially help people perform at their highest and help people reach epic goals. So on the bottom here, from the top to the bottom are the most important recovery tools to the bottom, as if this is cold water and the things to the bottom are the least important. So nutrition, sleep are essential for recovery, and then we have therapeutic exercise, followed by manual therapy, and then as the water gets deeper and colder and less valuable, modalities are like dry needles, ultrasound, electricity, and even lower massage, stretching, and then we're going to throw red lasers and recovery boots and like all the silly stuff way down on the bottom. And when somebody comes in injured, we're going to choose the things closest to the water because we got to get them above the water as soon as possible. And so that's really the physical therapy aspect, which quickly becomes the sports performance part. So let's spend the majority of our time today talking about what's above the water, because we have spent a lot of time in other shows on what's below the water, but what's above the water? Well, the foundation for this iceberg of performance is strength and work capacity. Now, I make a lot of social media posts about strength, but it's not just adding load to people and making them lift really heavy. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is a gradual increase in load that helps a person tolerate more and more stress. At the end of the day, there's nothing that I can do from the outside in that's better than the inside out. And inside out is putting in the work and teaching this body how to tolerate stress. Now, when I say strengthening, I'm talking about stabilizing the available range of motion, proximal to distal strength, which means in the arm it would be shoulder blade, shoulder rotator cuff, scapular stabilizers, all the muscles closest to the shoulder as a way of helping all the way down the arm. And we've done lots and lots of social media on that. Proximal to distal, hip first versus the foot. And at the end of the day, it has to be heavy. And the way that starting strength classifies strength is the maximum amount of load through the maximum amount of range of motion. That means hex bars won't cut it. That means rubber bands will never work. I mean, we have a epidemic of shoulder pain in throwing sports, and the majority of those athletes are utilizing bands as a way of warming up and supposedly taking care of their arm, but they're not providing any strength there. So it has to be loaded, it has to be heavy, and it has to be progressive over time. And as we get through a lot of these examples, we're going to be able to talk about the details of how that happens. So the foundation for youth sports, the foundation for an adult changing from team sport person to try to take on running or triathlon or even obstacle course racing. The foundation of being able to change and to start doing something new is strength. And we need to start there. Start with the body first, and then start to build away from the body. So that's why strength is the foundation. And we'll keep talking about that. Now, the second most important thing right on top of strength is individual sport skills or elevated peak velocity. So that means if I'm a thrower, I need the foundation strength to be able to tolerate moving my arm fast. And elevated peak performance would be, or elevating peak velocity would be initiating, throwing hard, moving my arm faster, kicking harder, and essentially learning how to move the body through a faster speed. And that requires control. That's where we start looking at arm slot and where to strike the ball in kicking, or starting to increase the stroke velocity in swimming, something like that, where we're really starting to move the limb faster. And then from there, we're going to talk about conditioning. Now, conditioning is aerobic versus anaerobic. So if you take baseball, for example, a pitcher needs to have some aerobic conditioning to be able to tolerate the length of time that they're going to be pitching. But they pitch in short bouts. So they might sit for 5 or 10 minutes in the dugout waiting for their team to bat. And then when they come up to pitch, they got to go hard for those 10 or so pitches. That's what the average inning is, about 10 pitches. So aerobic conditioning would be tolerate the 45 minutes or an hour worth of work. And then the anaerobic would be going hard for those few minutes while they throw those 10 pitches. This is environment specific, which means if you are running on grass, if you're a cross-country runner, you got to run on hills and dirt. So it really depends on what environment you're in. And this is essentially plyometrics, speed work. This is for a track athlete. This is running hard intervals on the track. Baseball pitchers, heavy balls, bouncing balls on the wall. It is definitely not something like battle ropes. So battle ropes don't count because the hands are fixed to the rope, which doesn't prepare you functionally for anything. But sport specific, we can come up with speed work that's actually functional and we basically load these joints and take advantage of the elevated peak speeds that are happening, and then there needs to be a strength base to be able to support that. So we're going to keep trying to go back and forth and see how all these things sort of intermingle with each other, because it is essentially a pyramid and it all builds on top of each other. Now, the next important thing is what we would call sports skills. And I would call this the practicing each phase of the sport. So that means if you're a pitcher returning to play, then a simulated inning might be something that you do, or one individual at bat, a live at bat. If you're a swimmer, it might be, you warm your shoulder up, you do some of your conditioning to be able to get your arm moving faster, both of your arms moving faster, and then you might do like, 100 meter bout of your particular stroke, and you basically work on your flip turns and basically trying to get all the specifics of the sport that you do in one isolated little pocket. From there, we want to work on how that translates to actual competition. So this is where simulated games, simulated innings again, collection of all the individual sports skills, and this is where we start to include things like mental strength. A lot of people don't realize that at Maximum Velocity, we have taken a bunch of continuing education in how to build confidence, and we essentially take the evaluation and listen to the words that the athletes are using, and usually athletes are pretty bummed or depressed when they're injured. And how do we start converting the impairments that they have into performance? And mental strength is a part of that, and helping folks establish confidence is definitely a goal. So we start now to include sport-specific knowledge, for a shortstop, where to put your feet when you're turning a double play, stuff like that. And if each individual situation of the sport is handled, and the body can tolerate speed, and there's some strength as a foundation to be able to support all of those things, everything matches up. Now, here's where some of the rubber starts to meet the road. Reps are incredibly controversial right now in the world of strength and conditioning and helping people perform at their best. You hear basketball coaches, basketball players talking about the number of three-pointers that a person shoots, or the number of pitches that a pitcher throws, or the number of miles a runner might run. Well, reps are definitely important. And one important concept is the concept of acute versus chronic workload. So let's talk about that. This is the actual programming of how a person does some of these activities. So let's say you're a pitcher and you pitch 80 pitches a game one time a week. If you do that for a couple of months, that's your chronic workload. If you're invited to another team, and on this team you throw another 80 pitches, essentially you're doubling your workload, and that's what we would call your acute workload. So whatever you're doing right now, that's your acute workload compared to what your body's used to. That's the chronic workload. If the acute workload is more than 136%, you are likely to be injured 136% or more. So doubling, in that pitcher example, doubling your pitch count in 1 week, probably within 2 or 3 weeks, that pitcher is going to be injured. And it has to do with increasing the acute workload more than what the chronic workload could tolerate. So if you're a pitcher, we would want more like maybe to come in relief on that second team and only throw 20, 30 pitches. And then over the next couple of weeks, increase that amount of volume and bridge that amount of volume over so that those reps don't start to be too much and stack up too fast over time. We need to be able to have the conditioning to be able to pull that off. We need to be able to have the speed in the arm to be able to tolerate that. We have to be able to have the strength to be able to serve as a foundation to be able to support that change in workload. So reps become a really important piece as all of these things start to stack together. At the very top, we would say strategy is a important part here of performance. And for me, strategy is if I'm talking to a runner who's been injured. Here's a perfect example. We have a guy in the clinic right now who is running his first 50K this weekend, and he strained his groin within 2 weeks of the race, and so he's freaking out because he can't run, and he's been doing all the conditioning, all the stuff below the pyramid to get to where he can get to healthy. Now he's completely asymptomatic. He started a foundation, which we're not actually going to be able to establish a true foundation of strength, but he's able to tolerate a little stress with, say, squatting, and he can run pain-free now. So we talked about his pacing strategy, which before he was going to, try to win his age group, try to win the race. He was actually going to really try to go for it. But now his strategy has changed. And if we have the experience of coaching runners and coaching triathletes, we say to him, listen, your race strategy has now changed. Let's use that first half marathon to 20 miles as a warm-up, and let's make sure that we can run this without any trouble. And then at that point, if we feel like it's in the cards to start to push, now start to go. And essentially, we gave him a warm-up to be able to run. We reestablished running. And then from there, able to talk about what would be the best way to strategize his mileage as he prepares to be able to run a new distance for him. Now, he also had the long runs over the last couple weeks to be able to support running this race. So he was in a position to step up and run this race. Just was which is an unfortunate thing that he strained his groin. But he's going to be able to run, and we're pretty stoked for him because I'm not sure any other outfit would be able to help him, because if we just put ice and electricity and dry needles and we just did all the things that make it feel good, but we don't build in the tissue's ability to tolerate stress, then there's no way for him to run. And as soon as he runs, he'll probably feel that strain once again. So what I've done is prepared some examples of some of the athletes that have come through the clinic and basically talk about how their iceberg of performance doesn't add up. And then we go back and fix the fundamentals and move them up the ladder. So the first is going to be a pitcher / outfielder who reports to the clinic with massive elbow and shoulder pain. And the dad and the athlete are gravely worried about Tommy John's and whether or not he needs a orthopedic consult to be able to see if he needs his elbow operated on. So when we do his evaluation and we're looking at all the things below the waterline here, does he have normal strength? Does he have normal range of motion? What are the things we got to do to back this elbow and shoulder pain down? And basically what we did was we And if we look at the way he was training, we can see some big glaring holes. His repetitions in acute versus chronic workload were way off. So he was ramping up throwing. He was throwing too many times a week. He wasn't able to control his repetitions. He was not doing any conditioning whatsoever. So he didn't have any speed work on his arm. He didn't have any plyometrics on his body, much less his arm. And when I got video from the dad of him pitching, he was trying to throw junk that required an arm slot that was really, really low. So the closer that arm slot gets to 3 o'clock, the worse the impact of the elbow is. So there's a really high correlation with elbow pain and a really low slot. And that slot position has everything to do with the rotator cuff's ability to keep the arm up and high. And then when he tests his strength, it's literally poor. So this is a guy who's doing all of the status quo elite pitcher things. He's got bands, he's got this, he's got that, he's doing all the things. And his rotator cuff is 2 out of 5, which is technically poor. So if he doesn't have the rotator cuff strength to tolerate the arm speed and the slot that he's using, and he doesn't have the plyometrics behind him, then he can't control high velocities. And then he overutilizes his arm by throwing hard too often, and that combination of things was resulting in elbow pain. If he went to a place that only did modalities, ice, electricity, dry needles, did rubber band exercises that don't prepare his arm to tolerate stress, it's possible that he could feel better, but then as soon as he goes back to throwing, it starts to hurt again. As soon as he ramps up that velocity, he starts to feel pain again. As soon as he throws too many pitches, he'll be right back to elbow and shoulder pain. And for whatever reason, baseball's way of handling this is to feel the elbow, feel the shoulder pain, shut him down. Shut him down for 2 weeks, shut him down for a month, give him 4 months. The more rest you give an unconditioned arm, the worse and the sooner the symptoms are going to come back. This is a strength problem. This is a stress and work capacity problem. If you don't improve the arm's ability to tolerate stress, there's no reason for it to be good when it goes back to throwing. So the rest will make it worse. So what do? We went to work on rotator cuff stability. And we always say, if you get an elbow problem, you missed a shoulder problem. So go to work on rotator cuff stability. Really develop really strong stability in the shoulder. From there, build push press. Now in baseball, heavy things above your head are very, very faux pas. And there's a lot of elite practitioners out there who would tell you that that's a mistake. And I'm here to tell you it's because they don't understand the details of why it's important for that to be above your head. If you don't have the rotator cuff stability to tolerate the bar above your head, then the bar is going to hurt the shoulder. And at the end of the day, if that's the foundation for getting this arm to move at high velocities, then you're missing the point. If we are doing these rinky-dink bands and they're not providing stress, and you don't have the rotator cuff to tolerate something heavy above your head, then yes, the bar is going to hurt. But by establishing good rotator cuff conditioning, we'll tolerate the bar much, much better. And if we can get that bar really, really high above your head, we can develop strength in that upright, tall slot position. And now he has the strength to hold the ball in that position when he throws. The more throws he makes, the stronger he is, the higher he's going to be able to keep that arm slot, the less likely he is to get to a place where it starts to bring on his elbow pain. So the heavy bar above his head was absolutely paramount to being able to hold a really tall slot. So then he goes to work on plyometrics. Plyometrics mean that, and now he's pain free. So once we establish rotator cuff stability, his elbow pain goes away, his shoulder pain goes away. Now it's a matter of building in fast speeds. Now it's on to the performance of the arm. Plyometrics, speed work, trying to teach this arm how to be coordinated in that slot at high velocities. And we work on overall conditioning. So deadlift, squat are essential to upright posture and being able to take care of himself as an athlete in general. So he's the strongest he's ever been. He can put the heaviest bar above his head he could ever do. And now it comes down to long toss. And now I gave him a long toss program built in, being able to throw hard, long distances. He could do that with no elbow or shoulder pain. We're educating this slot as we work on this long toss. And then eventually, once he can reach a certain distance, then we pull him in and have him start throwing hard the distance of pitching. From there, can he do off the mound? When he can pitch off the mound, then can he throw a bullpen? And we started with 20 fastballs. All I want you to do is throw 20 fastballs. And then as it increases in volume, then we say, okay, let's go back to 20. And I want you to throw 12 fastballs, 4 sliders, 4 curveballs. And we start to build in junk. And then now he's increased his velocity by 10 miles per hour in the 6 months we've been working together. Absolutely no elbow pain, absolutely no shoulder pain, and is on cloud 9 with how well his shoulder is performing. So by going back and correcting the strength base, we're able to move him up and build in the aspects of the top of the iceberg. Okay, so that's my baseball player. Now let's talk about my level 10 gymnast. So level 10 gymnast means that that's essentially elite gymnast. All of the Olympians are level 10s. She reports to physical therapy after shoulder surgery, labrum repair. Did her rehab, had a very ordinary labrum repair that any PT up and down the street can carry out. Along the way, building in really, really advanced rotator cuff, really, really advanced strength. And again, if we look at how her Iceberg of Performance fell through, it was too many repetitions of bars, too many repetitions of the vault, and not able to control how much force is moving through her shoulder. She has poor scapular control when she's hanging, poor scapular control or shoulder blade control when her hands touch the vault, and rotator cuff is as weak can be. So again, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5 rotator cuff strength when she reports. And if I had to pick the hardest working group of athletes, it's definitely gymnasts. Gymnasts are savages. They work 6 days a week, long hours, more hours than any other athlete. And so for somebody like her to have a lack of conditioning just blows my mind. But generally speaking, I think gymnastics is like 10, 20 years behind sports science. So the top of her iceberg is in shambles, and she's not able to control all of the details as it goes up and down. So having 6 months off of gym, we were able to establish a ridiculous amount of work capacity compared to what she's used to. And we really go to work on strength, heavy push press, deadlifts, squat, try to get her body as stress resistant as possible. And then plyometrics, speed work. And then for her, we have to build in hanging and teaching her how to control her scapula in hanging. We started with handstands. Can she control her how do we build in handstands? partial weight bearing, full weight bearing, get her onto her hands, and then teach her how to control her shoulder blades and her rotator cuff with her hands in contact with the floor. And then from there, we started with like back walkovers and then eventually back handsprings. And all this is happening in the clinic. Teaching her how to do hanging. We got her onto pull-ups, and eventually she's easily the strongest she's ever been, far better control than she's ever had. Deadlift and squat strength is moving up, and then we coached her on how to increase her repetitions as she goes back to gym. Okay, so what I want you to tell coach, if everyone's going to do 10 reps, I want you to do 3. And then eventually it becomes 5, and then eventually it becomes 7. And now you can do full reps. Let's start bringing in your more advanced skills. Well, she was back to full skills within like a month or 2 of rejoining full gym. And for this particular surgery, that's unheard of. She was invited to a college camp and was able to perform all of her high-level skills much sooner than most. And it's because she had a strength base. And that strength base is what was able to help her serve as a foundation to move up the pyramid here. All right, last one. 35 to 39-year-old triathlete, female, reports to physical therapy with massive shoulder pain as a result of a surgery that didn't work. So she had a clean out and did not alleviate her shoulder pain. In fact, now her shoulder pain is worse. And if we look at the way that she was training for swim, she had a faulty mechanics, faulty amount of volume, and was not able to control her arm during swimming. Really poor active range of motion in her shoulder. So she had limited range of motion, and she didn't have one lick of rotator cuff strength. So we used therapeutic exercise to get her back to healthy. Use a old school orthopedic approach to getting her back to a healthy shoulder. All of the therapeutics that any PT will use to get them healthy. And then from there, we go to work on building her pyramid. Rotator cuff strength becomes plyometrics, becomes push press. And then eventually we need to add deadlift and squat to get her body conditioned. And then once she can hold upright posture and she can push heavy things above her head with normal range of motion and normal rotator cuff strength, all of her symptoms resolve. First time in 2 years, full pain-free shoulder. Now we go, the first time she swam 200 meters, which when you tell a swimmer, that's the lowest volume, that's the volume we're going to do. And that's the lowest they've ever done in one round. They get really upset because it takes twice as much time to get dressed as it does to swim. But that's where her shoulder was. So 200 became 500, and 500 became 750, and 750 became 1,000. The point is that we built in her reps in a very shallow way so that her body could catch on to that change over time. Taught her how to warm up properly, educated her on proper swim mechanics, on where her elbow should be, and how to enter the water, and how her catch should go. And just basically built in this shoulder's ability to tolerate stress in the water. And then eventually she's at 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters, and she's pain-free with swimming. This woman went on to win her age group. She is now a few times now she's qualified for the Ironman or the 70.3 World Championships, which means she's top 2% in her age group in the world. And she will be racing in Norway next year in that particular race. So went from an unusable arm, complete inability to swim, and was able to build in normal range of motion, normal rotator cuff, get all the symptoms resolved, build up the strength, take the strength to the pool, build the pool, and eventually manage the repetitions in a way that she can swim pain-free. And now she's swimming lights out and continues to drop time and drop time and drop time, and is one of the elite swimmers, or one of the elite triathletes around. Definitely our fastest female in town, and been such an honor to work with her, and basically use this Iceberg of Performance as a way of getting her healthy. So that's the Iceberg of Performance, and essentially my life's work. And it's really interesting to see how it plays out in this sort of funny graphic. But ultimately, our physical therapy is not enough. It's not enough for people who want to reach a high level. It's not enough to just go and get healthy. We need to learn how to train. We need to learn where the mistakes are in training. And coming to physical therapy at maximum velocity is usually the first step in getting much fitter than before you got injured. And that's my goal for everybody who walks in the door, is not just get them healthy, not just restore normal activity, but make them faster and better than before they got injured. And at the end of the day, I think that's what establishes maximum velocity as the top place for athletes to come, and something that we're building for in the future. So with that being said, Ron out. Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy here in Las Vegas. Come get your Iceberg of Performance checked out. Word. Thanks for listening.